I'll show you the basic things we learned that were the reasons why we created that system, and then how it actually works. And I've also added a new section. It's the myths on slicers, because I hear so much stuff, through social media and various places that are just wrong. It's just that's just not accurate. So I've added a section in there to kind of state the facts. This is what it actually is, and this is what it's not, and be very clear about it. If you need to reach me, there's my contact information. That Leading with Attitude website, I've got a tab on there that says Fire Dynamics. So if you're looking for anything after the class, you're welcome to go get it. And if there's something that you need that you don't see, just shoot me an email or a phone call or whatever, and I'll find it for you. We'll get it posted up there that way for you as well. So we try to share as much of the information as we can to make it as accessible as we can, so that you can use it when you try to do it, whatever it is you want to do in your department. Now, a little bit about my background. Joe mentioned some of this stuff. I started in Hanover Fire and EMS, which is a northern suburb of Richmond, Virginia. I started there in '82 and have just been hanging out ever since. The department kind of changed around me. We used to be 16 individual organizations, and now we've become one big fire and EMS department, a combination fire department with career and volunteer firefighters. And I could talk for a couple hours just on how proud I am of my fire department, that these guys and gals that do this stuff are pretty remarkable. So, they've had to implement these tactical changes that we're going to talk about today, so hats off to them. I'm the past president of the ISFSI, and that is totally how I got into this. Right place, right time, dumb luck, whatever. One of my jobs as the president of the ISFSI was to go to meetings. And I would go to these meetings, and we'd be talking about whatever, whatever the flavor. You guys had meetings today, you go to meetings, talk about different stuff. And many times I would be in D.C., and with me, sitting somewhere in the meeting room, would be a guy named Dan Madrikowski, who was an engineer at NIST. And we would be talking about something completely different, and on the breaks, Dan would spin his laptop around and go, "Look at what we found out the other day on firefighting." And he would just blow my head right off. I would be freaking out in the hallway in some meeting someplace because of what Dan just told me. I call them "Damn it, Dan" conversations, as we've come to know him now. So he was doing that, repetitively. Look what we found about pushing fire, and look what we found about steam, and look what we found about, thermal this and that. And I was just totally losing my brains at that point. And I would go back to my fire department and tell them about it. I told my boss, actually, who's down in South Carolina, Fred Crosby. I would tell Fred, I say, "Hey, man, let me tell you what Dan told me, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it." It was very bizarre information that we were getting. And that's how this whole thing came about, was just hanging out with smart people. I just got lucky, and then Steve Kerber came along, and as I always try to say, and I'm not an engineer by no stretch of the imagination. I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. I just deliver the message. That's what I bring to the table. So I'll show you today what we did locally to try to implement this stuff. Other stuff, NFPA committee on all the 14s, 1403s, getting ready to go in cycle. We're working on that. All that other stuff that we can talk about that later. Also playing a rock band. I'll never miss a chance to tell you about playing in a rock band. Play for Rosie Soul. I'm the drummer for Rosie Soul. You can get us on iTunes and find us on the internet and YouTube and all that mess if you want to. There's certainly plenty there to look at. And I often get, this is what we look like when we deploy. Our minimum staffing is 5 people. We don't go anywhere without 5 people. So I always thought that was interesting. I've actually got a class I do at FDIC on secrets of the rock star engine companies, things I've learned in the rock and roll business that eerily are similar to the fire department business. It's a small group of people out doing these ridiculous things, and there's a lot of similarities and a lot of things that are different too. But like I said, I'm not here today I often get accused, "Oh, you're trying to sell me slicers." I don't really have an. If you want to use slicers, great, and if you don't, that's fine too. I will sell you a record. So go to the website later and check that out. So this is how I grew up. I grew up in the '80s in the fire service. Got in the early '80s. We had 3/4 boots, the long coats, no hoods. That's just I rode on the back of that thing. That was our first ladder truck that we had there. And that ladder, I'll never forget, that ladder would bang as you ride on the back step. It's back there banging, next to you and stuff. It was pretty interesting. But during that time of firefighting, when I grew up, these are kind of the primary lessons. These are the things that I came to believe through the company officers that taught me, the chief officers that taught me, and my own experience fighting fire in those times between the 80s and the 90s. And the first thing, vent equals cooling, man. You know, I used to have a saying, if it's hot and I can't see, I'm going to break glass. And I enjoy it quite a bit. That's one of my favorite things. You could tell where I was in the building. All you had to do is listen. And you'll hear me in a second. You know, something's going to break probably. And we thought that by opening those windows, it would raise the thermal balance up, take that up, make it better for the occupants of the building and for us too. That's what we believed in those days. We thought exterior fire attack was a defensive thing only. You know, that was only if you were going to be outside and, you know, that was kind of your punting on the building. We thought that an exterior fire attack would push a fire. That if you put water in a window, you would push it to the unburned sections of the house. That's what I grew up believing. I've actually given one poor lieutenant quite a hard time about it because I saw him putting water in the window one day, and I was wearing him out. You know, I was giving him myths in front of the house. And what did you do? I told you to go in the front door. What you put the water in the window for? Blah, 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 blah. And he keeps looking over my shoulder back at the building. You know, my back is to the fire building. I'm just, and he keeps looking around me. And finally, I turned around, and the fire was out. Kind of takes the wind out of your sails a little bit. But that's what we believed, that, you know, we would push the fire. We thought that that exterior fire attack would hurt the victims. We would steam them. I was always big, you know, hold that water until we get that primary search complete. Because we don't want to steam anybody in here. That was what we believed. And our engines were pretty good. I've actually, you know, I could think of numerous times where they would find the fire, sit on it. They'd wait for us to call the radio with the primary complete, and then they'd put it out. So that's where I'm coming from. And I say that because nobody is probably going to be a more of an aggressive interior mindset type person than me. That's just where I came from. So for me to go through this evolution, I will call it, of science into how we fight fire was an emotional journey for me. When we first started teaching these programs, I used to prefer theaters because the seats were bolted to the floor, and I felt safer when I would talk about the lessons from fire dynamics. But now that it's been around a little bit more, people are aware of it, they at least have heard of it. So when I start to talk about how these things that I grew up doing might not be the best move today, you know, I get it. I understand that it could be a little emotional for people. I don't have any roadies today. I don't know. So keep that, you know, that's where I'm coming from. This stuff is, when I talk about research, I'm going to do a 30,000-foot flyby, man. If you've not read this stuff or been keeping up with it, you've got a lot of read to do. You could spend months catching up on these studies. Like I said, I'm going to zip by real fast, real high, and just hit the main points. So I would encourage you, if you've not read this stuff, go back and read it, get caught up to speed, watch all the videos, look at all the studies, learn all you can. I felt like I've had to start over when it comes to fire behavior. But it's a lot of organizations that have been involved in this. NIST and UL. NIST, Dan Madrikowski is kind of the lead guy there. Just kind of got into it almost by accident. You know, I don't think anybody realized that there wasn't much research being done in the science of firefighting. It just hadn't happened. It was kind of one of those deals where everybody thought somebody else was doing it. And Dan discovered that nobody else was doing it. So he started pushing down that road again. Started out with line of duty death studies, and then moving on to some other tactical things. Working for him early on was a guy named Steve Kerber, who went on to work for UL. That's where a lot of the research, when I talk about research, those are the guys doing the research. Then they pass it on to us to try to figure out what to do with it. The fire departments that have been instrumental in the stuff we'll look at today have been New York, FDNY, and Chicago. And I was just talking to Chief of Spartanburg. I need a Spartanburg patch so I can add that on there, you know, because we spent a lot of hours down in South Carolina doing research burns, which I would hope some of y'all got to go see, and I hope we'll be back. And then the ISFSI is on there, the Instructor Society. The way the ISFSI fits in is these organizations can't necessarily apply for a grant, a research grant sometimes, but we can. As an association, we could do that. So we did. We've done several pretty big projects that South Carolina has helped us out a ton with on the technology back-end stuff. Has been, started out with building construction, and then some of the Spartanburg burns and some other projects has been funded through that. So we'll go wrangle the money. We'll get the deals with the researchers to do the research, get it done, and then our job when it's over with is to deliver a training program. So there was a building construction outline that came out a couple years ago that we put a lot of effort into, and then now we're getting ready to launch the Principles of Modern Fire Attack class. So there's a 20-minute video that you can watch online, free, it's just out there. And then there's an 8-hour program that's coming, that's just now launched, this is the first of the year, that's national rollout. So they've gotten, I believe they have 20 instructors they picked, like some of the best guys and gals in the business across the country. They went through a trainer with the engineers and all the guys that put the program together, and now they're hopping on airplanes to deliver 100 deliveries across the United States. So it's a pretty big push from the ISFSI to get that information out there. And that's really the name of the game now. As Steve Kerber has a saying, you know, that we now have a body of knowledge that should prompt us to make change. And that's really where we're focused these days, is we've read it, we've talked about it, we've looked at the stuff, well, now let's do something about it. You know, let's actually make some tactical adjustments so we can learn from this stuff before somebody else gets hurt or killed. So a little bit about where this comes from. One of the things I hear a lot, well, this kind of happened overnight. No, it's actually been going on a while. So if you look back at just the history of some of the main research efforts, one of the big ones, look at 2006. That's when we got the AFG support, the Assistance to Firefighter grants. And everywhere I go, I'm thankful that we have that money. If we didn't have that money, we wouldn't have that research, you know, and the equipment. You're probably familiar with it because we get stuff. We can get equipment, SCBAs, apparatus, things we need to operate through that grant program. There's also a section that provides for research, and that is incredible. It has been huge, and for us to be able to learn more about what we do and how we actually do business. 2007 is when I really personally started to pay attention. Awesome guy, Jerry Tracy from FDNY, was running this wind-driven experiment up in New York. They were having line of duty deaths where they would have window failures in high rises, and it would basically torch a hallway like a jet engine, man. And there was really nothing you could do to survive it. It just made it an unsurvivable situation, just that fast. And they wanted to know why that was and what to do about it. And that's when I started to notice a nozzle that was, I don't know, I think it's probably 15 feet long. It's a pipe that sticks out the window that you can go to the floor below the fire, stick it out the window, and shoot water back in the window up above it. And they can use a fire blanket to shut down the flow path, which we now know what that is. And I thought, I remember asking Dan this question. I said, Dan, that nozzle going in that window, isn't it going to push your fire through the rest of the apartment? That seems like that'd be a bad idea. And that's how a lot of this research has been. Like they're doing research on wind-driven fires, and the answer they came up with was to put water in the window. Well, that immediately asked the question, but doesn't that push the fire? Right? So now we have another question. So for everything you answer, you get 2 or 3 more questions. It's been like that going forward the whole way. It's been stacking up, all the way down to where we get to like 2010 and on. We really start to, what happens if we had enough pieces of the puzzle that they could answer some pretty definitive questions. Put things in tactical reality, in buildings that they could repeat the scenarios over and over again and really get some hard lessons. And that's where what you're going to see today came from. If you're not familiar with it, hang on to your hat. So it's been an ongoing process. It's been a lot of money. It's been a lot of people, a lot of resources, just a tremendous effort on the part of the fire service to try to figure this out. And again, thanks to the engineers at NIST and UL and ATF, I should acknowledge those guys too, because they've done a great job. So why this sense of urgency? Why are we in such a daggone hurry to change? It's for a lot of reasons. We know enough now that we could save a life on the next fire you run, even without a big policy change. Some of it's just a matter of a little attitude adjustment. You can do have a pretty tremendous impact on survival. But if you look at the data, you've heard the old analogy that we go to less fires. We don't get the opportunity to practice as much as we used to. It's true. But what you might not understand is the fires that we do get a chance to go to are more deadly than they ever were in the past. In fact, almost twice as deadly. If you look at that statistic up there in the 70s, 1.8 deaths per 100,000 fires, and in late 2000, 3.0 deaths per 100,000 fires. That's firefighters dying, not civilians. So it's not only do you get to do it less, it's twice as likely to kill you. So that's one of the things that should get your attention. I would hope it does. If not, maybe this will. Now, see, when I grew up, one of the first things I got involved with was firefighter survival training. When it first came out, to saving our own and get out alive and all that stuff, that was, I was in all that. And Virginia has a program called Mayday Firefighter Down that we've developed. And, we were always studying case studies. All that survival training is about case studies and tactics we can create so it won't happen again. And one of the things we noticed, we almost got used to seeing it. It was just kind of normal to see it. Was this pie chart would come out from the NFPA every year on the causes and types of line of duty deaths from year to year. And every year it always looked the same. You know, what's been the #1 killer of firefighters for as long as I can remember? Heart attacks, right? That's been it. That's been the thing. Then this thing came out, and I remember flipping through the page when I first got it and went, holy crap. That's first time I've ever seen that pie chart look like that. It used to be half the pie was going to be heart attacks. You just could set your watch by it. I got used to seeing it because it was always the same. Now it's not that way anymore. Heart attacks in the red there, it says overexertion, stress, and medical. It's 33%. Now you could argue, well, you know, we've had more focus on wellness, and we're maybe making some progress, and maybe we are. I hope we are. We're trying to, but I don't know if we've been that successful. You know, we're starting to see some transformations at the fire department, but still got a little work to go. You know, little ways to do. So the new kid on the block is rapid fire progression and explosion, 31%. That kid was absent a few years ago. Now all of a sudden we got a new friend on here to deal with. And if you add in some of the other things, lost inside, you know, and some of the structural collapse, you could look at that maybe. If you add those things up, heart attacks is no longer the #1 killer of firefighters. Fires is the #1 killer of firefighters. Hadn't been that way in a long, long, long time. So we could even sit and somewhat predict, it's a little bit of a guess, but I feel pretty confident in it, that if we don't get in front of this thing pretty quick, you're going to start to see not only increased civilian fire fatalities, which I think we're starting to get into, and some of the science I'll show you today as to why we think that, but you're going to see firefighters right there with them. So that's the sense of urgency, is to get out and try to get the information in front of fire departments, as many as we can, and then let them determine the best way to deal with it. But do something with it. Don't just look at it. So when we went through this whole evolution, we had 4 basic things that we learned from the research that really, this is what prompted us to make a move. We learned that there was a difference in the fuel, that the fires we're going to today aren't exactly like the fires we went to when I was riding backwards. We learned that water behaves in a way we did not exactly think it does, or at least we didn't believe so. Air, and then the tactics itself. Those 4 components are the things that really prompted us to take some action. And like I said, the reason we are down the road on this now is just because we got the information really early. I just happened to be sitting next to Dan, you know, and he's going, look at my laptop. And so we started trying to figure it out. And that's how this is what we've done in those last few years since then. So the fires have changed. What do I mean by that? Well, almost in every way. It kind of looks the same a little bit, but that's about it. I mean, it's a very different animal than it was when the fires that I started out going to. Now, you've heard us say that they develop faster than modern fuels. Once they get lit, they take off. They consume the majority of the oxygen in the compartment, causing vent-limited fires, which is something that we didn't deal with in the 80s. We didn't have vent-limited fires, you know. It just didn't happen that way. And they return to flashover much quicker than they ever have in the past. So rather than try to explain it, I'll show you a video. So what you've got here on the right, this is from the vent study. You see legacy fuel. The top right pane is the outside of the house, and the bottom right pane is furnished with legacy fuel. I call it grandma's house. You know, it's the stuff, when I went to grandma's house when I was a kid, that's the stuff I was sitting on. Over here in the modern fuel, same building, same fuel load by weight, so everything's all figured out so it's equal. We've got modern furnishings. And what can you tell already, just as the fires ignite, what's different about the modern fuel versus the legacy fuel? The smoke, right? I mean, that's like, wow, dramatic different. Grandma's house is burning pretty clean. This synthetic mess over here is putting a black soup up on the ceiling that's going upstairs to where all the bedrooms are. It's a nasty, toxic mess. Now, if I was to show up in my old fire truck with my 3/4 boots on and I ran in there with a water can, I could go in there and go, I could put that fire out at grandma's house, right? I'd laugh at the engine company when I came outside. I'll put it out again for you. How about this fire here at the modern fuel? Where'd it go? Where did it go? It ran out of oxygen. There's not enough oxygen to support combustion inside that compartment right now. Now, one of the things that we typically haven't thought about historically when we talk about research is what we do when we get there. The fire department shows up to this stuff. You know, we come rolling in, and we do things. Like we like to open doors and open windows, and we cause changes in the way the air moves in the building just by our very existence and being there. So you see these guys, they'll come in and they'll take a door and a window. I don't know if I take that window, but that's the one they take, right? And watch how the fire responds to this. Pretty quick, comes right on back heading towards flashover. Now, grandma's house, I can still run in there with my water can, and it's over. Not a problem. I've gone to a lethal environment very quickly over here on the left. Pretty dramatic differences in how those couple things work. So while I'm waiting on grandma's house to catch up, let's do a little review. Thinking about fire behavior itself. When I went through fire behavior, I got 3 hours in Firefighter 1. 3 hours, that's it. Got a whole career based on 3 hours of fire science. And I remember stuff that I would learn, I'd memorize it to try to get through the test. One of those things I had to memorize was pyrolysis. You just put it in there, get through the test, forget about it, right? That was kind of my attitude towards it when I went through it. Now I've learned it's got to go back and relearn all this stuff. Pyrolysis means that solids just really, they don't burn. Typical solids. They have to be converted to a gas for them to burn. You heat the solid, it converts to a gas, and then you have your fire, right? Same thing, liquids, all that stuff. So paying attention to that, I didn't really get it then. So when it converts to a gas, where does it go? Right? It just fills the room. It fills those spaces. We call it smoke, but smoke is basically unburned fuel. Now, if I had a box full of combustible gas, if I had a house full of combustible gas, and I sent you on a hazmat run, and you showed up with the hit team, and y'all are out there doing your hit stuff, what would you do before you entered that structure full of combustible gas? You get some books out and read about it, and look on the internet, and probably order some food, right? Before you do anything towards going inside this place. You would have a completely different routine and mindset going into that. But we show up at a house fire full of combustible gas, same thing, and we just roll up in there, man, to give it no thought whatsoever. It's got an ignition source inside the building already. You know, from a hazmat perspective, that seems a little crazy, but we've never made the connection that they're kind of the same, right? So another thing that we don't often get is understanding temperature. You know, the actual temperature is kind of a funky way to explain the threat because we misinterpret it a lot. You know, the Fahrenheit degree that you get might not necessarily represent the energy being released inside the space. I think of it these days as more of a microwave, that it's releasing energy inside this box, and we're absorbing that energy, and we're heating up, and at some point it's going to quit. We just can't take it anymore, right? But think about the temperatures that a civilian might be able to survive inside a box. What do you think? Guess. I mean, I realize it's an ish kind of thing, right? So if you had to pick a number ish that a civilian might be able to survive inside of a fire, I realize exposure time and where they are and all that stuff matters, but just round numbers. What would you think they could tolerate? That's TV. This is not TV. You guys are live. We're here. What do you think they can do? 140. I got a 140. Anybody else? And I'd say 140 is a good-ish. It's ballpark. Could be 30, could be 20, could be 50. Just depends. You know, it depends on a lot of things. But it's a pretty low number, right? I mean, that number is pretty low for a civilian to be able to survive inside one of these compartments. What do you think our number is? What's our ish number? Textbook used to say 1,000 degrees. What planet? What the heck? But that's what it said. Our number, long story short, is more like 300 or 400 maybe. We discovered this the hard way because of a line of duty death in Pennsylvania where an instructor died in a state burn building stoking a fire, and his face piece failed while he was stoking the fire. And Dan went and looked to find out what the heck's that all about and ran a study, and that's one of the times he spun his laptop around and goes, "Look at this." And I went, we had text messaging by then, so I'm texting back to the fire academy going, "Quit it, stop it now." We used to craze our face piece all the time. You know, that's what we called it. You get that crackle, you know, you get a little thing across your face piece, and we just, get another one, right? You know, throw that down, get another one, keep on going. Now it's a near miss. We had no idea what we were doing. 300 or 400 degrees. The new NFPA standard says 500 degrees if you have a new one. If you don't, you're about 300 degrees is the common failure point. That's a long way from the 1,000 degrees they said in the textbook, right? Or what you might have believed about what you could tolerate. And even understanding how your turnout gear works in the first place. It's not a magic fire suit like some folks will believe, that you can just run up in the middle of anything and you're going to be okay. That's not the way it works at all. It absorbs energy. That's the way it works. So go back to your hazmat frame of mind. When you throw an absorbent down in a product and it starts to absorb the product, when it becomes saturated, how does it work? It stops. That's over. It doesn't do it anymore. It's full. Your turnout gear is the same way. So when you're exposed to this energy inside of a box, it's going to absorb that energy and hopefully do its job. But at some point, it's going to become saturated, and it's going to stop. If you've ever been that hot, a lot of instructors have the pleasure of appreciating that because we're monkeying around inside these, burn buildings and stuff. And when your gear becomes hot, you get saturated, it's like right now. 1 minute I'm fine, and the next minute you're doing the happy dance, trying to get away from your turnout gear. It's just that quick. So to have an expectation of any kind of creeping up of temperature inside of a structure fire, it's probably not going to happen that way. By the time you realize you're in trouble, you're in deep trouble. It's not like it used to be where we had these things hanging out and we had a better feel for what was happening. So now let's look at these numbers. I had to wait for Grandma's house to catch up because she's so slow getting there, right? Look at the difference. There's a couple of things that I want to really point out. Number one, vent limited in 5 minutes. Modern fuels went vent limited in 5 minutes. Now, let's understand what that means. First off, the fire ran out of oxygen. So you got your fire triangle, it's going along, it's burning, it runs out of oxygen, and it falls down, right? So now I've got the heat, I got the fuel, I just need the air. Now, you might have run this fire. I know we have at home. Where we go on a kitchen fire about, say, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and we get there, and the homeowner's there and says, my kitchen was on fire. So is it on fire now? Nope. What do you mean? They mark on scene with nothing showing. They walk inside, they got the kitchen all burned up, the smoke staying all up throughout the house, and the pets are dead. But there's no fire. We never really flow any water at all. How does that happen? So we went vent limited, right? So we have the triangle, we drop the air, we don't have any oxygen, and then we have fuel and heat. And if you let it sit all day, you eventually lose the heat too. And now we've got just a mess. We're running it. If you haven't run it yet, it's coming to you soon. 5 minutes it takes to achieve vent limited status. And I always try to remind people, when the fire is vent limited, so is everyone else in there. If the fire doesn't have enough oxygen to support combustion, you don't have enough oxygen to breathe in 5 minutes. Now, anybody volunteer firefighters respond from home? Ever done that? I did it. I used to, when I was a younger man, I would have my stuff laid out. You lay out your pants, you got your boots, you got everything, the keys, you got everything all set so that if the plectron goes off, the plectron's like a big pager for young folks. It's a the tone comes out of it. You got a call, and you would get up and get your stuff on, and then you'd head out to the firehouse to get the truck. How long does it take? What do you think I could do it as a young man trying to get out the house? How long do you think it would take me? Couple of minutes, 2 minutes, depends on if you got to pee or not. Now you're older, right? So you got to figure those things out. But so 2 minutes. So what if you took a minute away for the smoke alarm to activate? Fire, you get ignition, smoke alarm's got to go up, got fire, it's got to activate. Give that about a minute. Then it's going to take me 2 minutes to get out, and I'm practiced. I have muscle memory. I've done this enough that I know what I'm doing to be able to get out of here. I have everything all set up. I set out my pants and my boots and everything, and I'm ready to go. Imagine a civilian waking up to a smoke alarm they probably never heard, going, what the heck is that, and what's all the smoke? And then they've got to get oriented, and they've got to find their family and try to get out of the house. You're dead in less than 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes, you're going to be dead. So when I say we expect an increase of civilian deaths, that's why. It's just simple math, man. The window to get out, look at that compared to 21 minutes in the legacy fuels. You had 21 minutes to get out of there. Can you do it in 21 minutes? Yeah, probably so, unless something goes horribly wrong. But can you do it in 5? Less than 5. That's a little iffy. All of these fires have gone vent limited, all the test fires. When's the last time you saw fire do something like that predictably? Where they just, too much fuel inside the place. So The next number I want to look at is the split on flashover. Here, you see here they vented at about 8 minutes, and they have flashover at about 2 minutes later. And if you compare that to the other fuels, the legacy fuels, you'll see that they've got a 6 minute, 8 minute split on there. Now, if you're a pretty good engine company, can you get your hose lines into the seat of the fire, wherever it might be, in, say, 6 minutes? I hope so. If not, let's work on that first, right? So you should be able to do that, right? Can you do it in 2 minutes? Can you get your hose line in place, water flowing in 2 minutes from the time you pop the door? All right, well, it's getting exciting now, right? It's kind of pushing it. Here's the bad news. That's the optimistic set of data from the vent study. They found it to be 30 seconds to 2 minutes. This is the high end. This is giving you all the time you're going to get, 2 minutes. It's from somewhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. Can you get your hose line at the seat of the fire in 30 seconds? Nah, it better be like right there. You know, you're going to have to be daggone lucky to get your hose stream there at the right time in the right place. Big difference. Huge difference in the changes of fuels. Now think about the tactics that we hold dear today, the traditional fire tactics. Where do they come from? From where did these tactics originate? I wrote a book. It was many years ago now, and I was also at that time going back to school. And I was going to say something in the book that was a little bit edgy. So I called up the editor, and I said, hey, I'm going to say this thing in the book. Do I need to footnote it? I was used to, have to write a footnote, and then you got to put that stupid thing at the back of the paper. I was thinking I had to do that or something. So I was like, how do you want me to do it? And she says, oh, you don't have to do any of that. I'm like, I can just say it? She says, yep. She said, you are the author. If you say it, it is so. I said, what? And it was like one of those, where the perspective changes in a horror movie. And I turned around and looked at my bookshelf and went, you mean to tell me that's how that got done? And she just laughed and said, that's it. You are the author. You write it. It is so. Holy crap. I mean, basically, you have somebody that goes through a lot of experience. They spend 20, 30 years learning something. They learn how to do it well. They write it down. This is how we did it. This is what we did. And they show it to some other dudes who have similar experience. And they look at it and go, yep, that's pretty much it. And then they publish it. There's your process. So if you look at this and think about it, the fires that these subject matter experts went to that developed all this is how we do it, when did those fires occur? Which fire was it that they went to when they developed what we call traditional tactics? They were going to legacy fuel fires because that's when it happened. And I will tell you that the tactics they developed and they created work on legacy fuel fires. It's cool. If you happen to go to a legacy fuel fire, knock yourself out. It's going to be fine. But good luck finding one. Because it's not just about when the house was built, it's about the stuff they put in it. And the modernization things that occur. They put in new doors and new windows and energy efficient features, and they put new couches and appliances and all this other synthetic mess in there that weren't there when those other tactics were developed. And I think a lot of us miss that point, that the fires are truly different. The tactics we have, there's like a little bit of a thing about being, paying attention to tradition and honoring tradition, and I absolutely agree. We honor tradition, and those tactics were great in that time, but we're in a different time, and that's one of the hard kind of barriers we're having. Get people to understand, man, the fire has changed in a dramatic way, and we should be updating our tactics to match it, so that we can meet it head to head. It's been whipping our tail here lately. I noticed probably 10 or 15 years ago, we would go to fires and it would whip us pretty good. I mean, we could be there for a half hour, an hour sometimes, wrestling with this thing, and it didn't used to be like that. The tactics just weren't working quite like they used to be. We started seeing flashover occur on a regular basis. You could almost count on it. Now you can. If it doesn't go vent limited and you give it enough air, it's going to flash. You can count on it. Where that didn't used to be the case back in the older days. Flashover was more of a rare occurrence. So when I say fuels, the fires have changed and they're different, this is what I mean. We have increased petroleum-based fuels. Good luck trying to find something organic in this building, any building that you're in. This stuff's all plastic. It's just solidified petroleum, all of it. So when it burns, it's going to behave differently than cotton and wool and things that we saw back in the older days. Then you bring in your energy efficient and green construction. Not only are the houses tighter, You know, my ears pop sometimes when somebody opens the front door because there's so much energy efficiency going on. But they also changed the floor plans where now you have these big vaulted ceilings and open floor plans. I grew up in a rancher. You know, when I grew up, it was a box with a bunch of little boxes in it, and every box had a door. You know, that's just how it was. And now it's anything but that almost. You know, now you have these huge open floor plans that are just ripe for fire growth. Nothing in the way. This big space, let it rip. You know, so our tactics are mismatched. That's the basis of the whole thing, is the tactics that we had traditionally work on traditional fires, and they still do today. If you happen to go on one, but I bet you're probably going to have a hard time finding it. So keep that in mind. Now, water. What do we do with water when we look at this? Water makes fire better. That's one of the things I always tell people. If you need to take notes, write that on your hand. Water makes fire better. That's pretty much, that's it. You put water on it, it's going to get better. Now, there are some nuances as to how you might put water on it, but for the most part, water works. It's all about this thing. This is what everybody gets excited about, is we're going to put water in from an exterior position. Right? So you got fire blowing at the back door here, and on side A, in a minute, they're going to throw a fire stream in there, and I will point out that that doesn't go straight to the back. You know, there are partition walls and stuff in there. So that water goes into a heated space, and you'll see in a second when they flow water, the effect it has on the rear of the structure. Does some pretty good work. You know, so water has a tremendous impact. We used to kind of be stingy with it a little bit. We would be kind of apprehensive to flow water, and now we've learned that the best thing we could do is open the stinking bail most of the time. So here's some data. I'm just going to take a little snapshot out of the data. I could show you like 100 of these, and we could go all day, you know, into the data. But this is just a basic look at what we're dealing with. You remember the fire growth curve? Remember you learned that in Firefighter 1? There's the ignition phase, and then it goes into growth, and then it gets to fully developed or flash over, and then it has decay. Remember that little thing? Well, the one thing about that particular fire that we didn't really maybe understand was it was a fuel-limited fire. They lit some stuff in a lab and watched it to see what happened. No fire department responded. It had plenty of air to burn. It just burned up the fuel. That's not what happens in real life, you know. It's different than that when we actually go to a fire. And if you look at the beginning of this thing, you'll see the initial fire growth curve right here. So here it starts the ignition, and you start to see it going into growth phase. But then we get this little hiccup right here. You see this dip? What's happening there? Why did the temperatures drop? Ran out of air. Not enough air to support combustion. So it dips the temperatures a little bit. And if you don't provide it any air at all, no windows fail, no occupants open anything, you know, the police don't kick a door or anything like that, you could see it dip right off in decay, which we've had those fires a couple times already. But nope, the fire department came, and we showed up and opened some stuff, and we had fire growth. We had pretty good fire growth. We're cooking right along, business as usual, until this little anomaly happens. That suppression through the front door, that's that hose stream going in the front door. It took the thermocouples and dropped them like a rock. Not just one of them, all of them. Every thermocouple into place, wham, on the floor. Now, one of the key lessons here, yes, water makes fire better. It had a tremendous impact by putting water in that space. But don't forget what happens here. See, in this particular case, they said, well, what if we put water in there and that's all we do? We throw that initial stream in there and we just leave it alone. What will happen? Well, it came back, right? It came back way worse than it was to begin with. Why do you think it's so much hotter now? Got air. We've opened it up. It can breathe now. It can do what it wants to do. So now it's ready to roll. So me looking at this, I'm like, well, I'm not a smart man, but if I was to try to deal with this thing, understanding the temperatures that I can handle, you know, the energy that I can handle inside of a burning structure, I know I'm 305, somewhere in there. Where would I want to operate if I had to in this structure? Might I suggest right in there someplace? Right? So we use that water to take that initial threat down. But it's not over. It's not over at all. So if we've got to get to an interior position, get on the seat of the fire and extinguish this thing, and the clock is running. It's not like we just throw water in it and just stand around and go, yay, it's over. We could put some water in there, and we have to go in and fight fire immediately, or else it will come back. So that's one of the key things. Water makes fire better, but you must get inside and take care of business. Now here's another view. This is, I told, the squiggly lines, engineers do all that stuff with the Celsius and everything. I was like, can we draw a picture? And they first gave us a picture and then it has Celsius on it and said, well, no, we don't like Celsius. We ignored that. Stick your Celsius in your backside and get on out of here. That's what we said when they brought that out. Remember that? The whole world's turning into Celsius. We were like, no, not us. So they had to convert it to Fahrenheit for us to be able to deal with it. So this was all converted. And if you look, the little lines here are pointing at where the thermocouple would be, so you can tell what it is. And you can see that water going into the front door here with a fire in the rear of the structure back there. It took it from 1,200 degrees to 300 degrees. Which one would you take? Put a little water in it. And all throughout the building, same thing. We see, 650 to 250. We got 1,100 to 300. And I could line these up all day. We could look at all kinds of these things with the same thing on it. It's pretty consistent. Water takes that threat down pretty good for a minute. It works pretty well. Now, one of the issues, what about this push and fire thing? How do you put the water in it? Right? And if you're like me, I thought I'd seen push and fire before. I remember distinctly a fire that just would not go away. And I was blaming it on a hose line in another part of the building, that they were pushing it my way. Maybe. And now I know a little bit more about what's going on. It's an air issue almost all the time. Well, it is all the time. It's an air issue, not a water issue. Water puts it out. Air drives it around. I didn't consider the door behind me. Right? That's one of the funny things about us truck guys, is when I break a door, that's forcible entry. And when I break a window, that's ventilation. Somehow they're not the same. I don't know. But it's the same thing, right? So I didn't consider the door I just opened, the air coming in at me, right? So where's the fire headed? I think it's coming to me. No, it's coming to the door. I just happen to be there, right? So understanding that is a big piece. So here's a Spartanburg burn that was set up to try to prove the point of what's going on. And a lot of people misinterpret this video. They think, oh, look, see, it will push fire. We're like, we know, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to push fire. So they put a straight stream in the first window, right? They're going to put a straight stream in the window on the right, and you'll see the impact. If you watch the stairwell, that's kind of what everybody's looking at. You see all the instrumentation hanging out there. They'll look at fire upstairs all through the second floor, and they're going to put a straight stream in and see what the impacts are in the stairwell, right? So in a second, here they come. Might be some of y'all. If you see yourself, let me know. Take a selfie or something so we know that you're in there. So there goes the water. What's the conditions inside the stairwell? Good to go. No big deal, right? So on the other window, they're going to, same fire's burning, they're going to come in with a fog pattern. They put like a 30-degree fog pattern on that window to see what the impacts will be if they do it that way. There goes the fog stream. Hello. Did it have an impact on the stairwell? Uh-huh. For a couple of very specific reasons. Can a fog stream, does it move air? We know that because we used it for, hydraulic ventilation, right? And what we also didn't consider was what it did to the vent that it went in. That window is operating as a vent. It has pressure coming out of it. So if I occlude the vent, I always chuckle, that's the closest thing I ever come to saying anything EMS related at all. If you occlude the vent, where's the pressure going to go? Someplace else. In this case, down the stairs. You block the vent with a fog stream. You stopped it from being able to do what it likes to do. So bad. We've now discovered that we need to be more specific about if you do put water into a building from the exterior position, do it with a straight stream or a smooth bore, a solid stream. Straight or solid streams are the way to go. Let the vent keep doing what the vent does. So can't stress that enough. If you're going to use exterior water, use those types of streams to do it. You can use whichever flavor floats your boat, but keeping that stream tight will do a lot to help you with stirring the balance up in there. But what about steam? So this was my pet peeve, man. It really drove me nuts. And I've got some videos in the program that we could look at that where I see water going into space, and I fully expect to see steam, but I don't. And that used to drive me a little nuts, and I would call Dan and bug him about it. Go, how come there's no steam at the top of these steps? There's got to be some steam. Where'd the steam go? And I was like, that's got to be a problem. What's it going to do to the occupants? We're going to steam the occupants. Can't do that. You're crazy with all this water. So Dan's kind of like, okay. So he sent me off on it. He asked me one day, he says, show me a line of duty death or a civilian fire death where the cause of death was steam. I'm a smart ass. I went looking. I was up at the fire academy, going through the library and everywhere, man. I looked everywhere I could, try to figure out where is there. It's got to be. Surely it's happened. And after a few months, had to come back and report. No, I got nothing. And he says, what temperature is required to convert water to steam? 212 degrees. Get it? What temperature can a civilian survive? What is their condition at 212 degrees? Dead. They're not surviving that. We appreciate steam as firefighters because we can be in there. We're protected to the degree that we can be there and see it. But they don't. They're dead if it's that hot. You know, I never given that any consideration. And then I couldn't understand, how come I don't see the steam though? Where does the steam go when I see it released in these buildings? I don't see it anywhere else. Where does it go? So remember in Firefighter 1 class when they taught you that steam expands at a rate of 1,700 to 1. What do you do if you dramatically cool it? What does it do? It goes the other way. Psh, crap. Never gave that any consideration either. You know, it's like those moments where you just feel like a big dummy standing there. I was like, well, never thought about that. But yeah, if you dramatically cool it. So I said, well, so what you're telling me is that the water went in there and there's a rapid snap of steam and then it hits the floor? Yep. What the steam you're looking for is in a puddle. I'd never given that any slightest consideration. So I've been all round up about not much, I guess, you know. So now he's taken away a lot of the things that I believed were the reasons why I didn't do something. You know, I was worried about steaming people. You ain't gonna worry about that. I was worried about stirring up the stuff. You ain't gonna worry about that either. Put water on it. I mean, he just kind of took away all my ammo that I would have used to argue the other way. Picked it apart line by line, you know. If we had more time, we could go through all that. But nozzle technique, it really does matter for improving conditions. The data shows it makes sense. It's not a defensive or submissive tactic like some people will lead you to believe. I can tell you it's, in fact, a very aggressive tactic because it puts the fire out. That's one of the things I've noticed about the fires in my locality, is they're out. It's just over. When the engine company arrives with this new stuff, it's done, man. If you think you go ride down there and catch a little fire in about 15, 20 minutes, it's over with. You're going to get there for the mop up because it's very effective. It's very aggressive. So I've been shocked at how effective it has been. And I always sit back and think, gosh, man, I remember all these buildings. I wish if I'd known better, they might still be standing. You know, we've got plenty of parking lots that are that should have my name on it. So now we know a little bit more about it. Is this tactic new? Who's been in the fire department since the 80s or before? Raise your hands. Is this new to you? No, not at all. It looks pretty familiar, right? And that's one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand. This stuff has actually been around for a lot of years. It's been something that we've done. This is what we were doing when I got in, through necessity. Why did we operate that way back in the day? You had to, man. You don't have a hood. Your hiney's hanging out the back of your pants. You can't do but so much, right? We had to cool it down before we went in there, or else we just couldn't go in there. So that's what we did. Now the technique has evolved a little bit because we're not trying to create so much steam. Now we're using a deal where we're you know, I always tell you, rotate that line right, rotate that line right. If you're going to open the bail, spin it right, pull the bail, spin it right, pull the bail. Just get in that habit because it's easy to, you know that thing is, if you wrestle around in a building, it's going to move. So make sure it's right. And they just take care of business. So this is actually from a training film from the 60s called The Nozzleman. And I mean training film like on a reel, you know, training film. Old thing. We found it, we're able to get it digital. So there's one fire on here I always love to check out because it's this one. It's an attic fire in a balloon construction house. And they're going to put water in the window on the downstairs. You know, they're whipping it and stuff, which is, you know, like I said, that's what they did back then. But watch this. They put water in there, whip it around, and watch the impact on the attic fire. Ta-da. One of the toughest crowds to try to teach this to, I've taught it to a lot of different types of people, and one of the toughest crowds is civilians. When I'm speaking to civilians about this, a couple times I've had to do it, and I say, water makes fire better, and they look at me like, you got a whole class on that? I'm like, yeah, we got a whole class on it. It seems like we kind of knew that, didn't we? I'm like, well, yeah. You know, they don't get it, that we had this belief that we operated a certain way. But so water makes fire better. Let's look at air. Air makes fire worse. If you add air to it, it's going to grow. We've come to kind of use the terms now as flow path and door control. Everybody's talking about flow path. I actually heard of a municipal fire department that made their recruits, if the recruit said flow path, they had to run the stairs. Which I just got a chuckle out of. I'd be a one-shaped dude, right, if I was there, because I'm almost flow path, flow path, flow path. You know, because it's to me, it's one of the greatest killer of firefighters. It used to be heart attacks. Now I would argue that it's flow path. That's what's killing us, is we're on the exhaust ends of flow paths and we don't know it, much less what it is half the time. So it's important to understand it, what it works, how it works. In these videos, this is one of the first things when I started to notice it, that you'd see this kind of thing where guys would open up a window, stuff I'd done my whole life in the fire department, and we would get a violent reaction from the fire. It would rock the flash over right away. And I could go on YouTube. This is when we just got the internet, YouTube came along, and you realize you could type fire in it, and then you could watch a bunch of fires. I'm sitting there for hours doing this, and I started to notice that you can see this a lot. The same thing over and over again. You see the guys go in the front door, you see the truck company get there and go break some windows, and then you see the guys come running out the front door like this, with their fire blowing on the tail. And why is that happening over and over and over and over? Well, if you have a vent-limited fire and you give it air, what could you expect it to do? I asked that question to the engineers, and that's what they told me. You got a vent-limited fire, it's going to go boof. Of course it is. So we have to come up with ways, to try to avoid that. Here's another case where I can watch a fire growth on this thing in the basement. Fire's in the basement, and as he breaks windows, you see it start to extend up the side of the house. And how long do you think it will take before things get dramatically worse? Aside from Grace right here that falls down. There you go. You could line them up all day. If you have vent-limited fires and you give them air, they're going to do that. What you don't know is there's a hose team on the front side of that house trying to go through the front door. And they're also doing this right about now. So understanding that is key. Why is it doing that? And this is the definition for flow path. Movement of heat and smoke from the higher pressure within a fire area towards a lower pressure via doors or windows. Pressure. That's something I never thought about in firefighting. What pressure got to do with it? But when this thing is expending energy, creating energy inside of a box, it's pressurizing the box. And it's going to do something, right? If you have that pressurization, it's got to go someplace. When we open things up and change the configuration of the box, it causes the pressure to move. Now things are going to move around inside of that box. And it has a dramatic effect on fire growth and our survivability. So understanding that the best way I can describe it to you is the neutral plane. So the more I think about this, the more I am amazed that I didn't kill myself already. For every fire door I've ever opened, I've probably seen a neutral plane. If you think back on it, it's kind of pretty standard stuff. You open the fire door up, it settles out, and then you've got high pressure blowing out the top, and you got low pressure going in. You got exhaust, and you got intake air coming in there into that box. And we've seen it all along and never thought anything about it. Right? So what happens is, if you look at the top right view there, we've got a neutral plane about halfway down the door. So what's happened is you have air intake going in low, it's going into the combustion chamber, and then it's exhausting out the same opening at the top. So you have two air currents. There's an intake air current going this way, and there's an exhaust current going that way, like that. Where those two currents rub together is the neutral plane. Right? So what I know now about this, looking at that picture, is that, okay, so I've got air going in, I got exhaust coming out, and I've got a fire, but it's pretty much right here. Right? This is okay, I can work with this. A little water right there and it's done. But as things start to advance, when I get down to this lower right-hand corner, for example, if I have an opening that has all exhaust, everything's coming out from the top, it doesn't matter what it is, window, door, anything, any opening, if I have that and I see that pressure is driving out from the top of the opening to the bottom of the opening, it is all exhaust, whether it be smoke, fire, whatever. Gas is coming out the box, the full width of that opening. There's something I can pretty much assume that must exist somewhere else. Something's open. It's getting its air from someplace. I'm looking at the exhaust end of a flow path. So if I can go around and figure out what that is when I'm doing my 360 size up and I'm running around the building real quick to see what's going on and I see an open door, aha, let me shut the door. You know, you can close down either side of the flow path and slow fire growth. Just, it's amazing the impact that it will have. Kind of like, you would almost think you put water in it when you look at the reduction in heat. So just simply shutting down that flow path is a big deal. So here's where we get killed. Don't worry about the numbers yet. Let me just tell you a story. Imagine this, visualize with me this fire. So we get to the fire, we got a report of somebody trapped on the second floor. Truck company gets out, the engine's doing their deal. They're monkeying around, getting water and do what engines do. And the truck company goes up, we pop the door, we got a bidirectional flow path, right? I got air coming out, I got exhaust coming out, fresh air going in at the front door. You've probably seen that before. Inside I go. Where's my visibility at inside that room? That first room. It's about right here, right about where the neutral plane is. I'm standing in it, you know. I'm just walking, I hadn't given it a thought. I'm just standing in the neutral plane, and it's like right here. And I find the stairs, and up I go. So I'm going to go up and do a search on the second floor. How does my visibility change when I go up the steps? It goes from I can see a couple feet to right there, nothing, right? You're going to see nothing. You get to the top of the steps, and you're searching around. Remember my rule of thumb from when I was younger. It's hot. I can't see. What would be my rule? Well, punch something, right? The first piece of glass I find is coming out of there. Now think about what I would do. Think about what I do when I do that. I get up there, I'll pop that window. How does it affect the flow path? Because I have a bidirectional flow path on the front door. I got it doing that like I wanted to, and now I just went above it, and I opened up another opening. What do you think is going to happen? She turned into a unidirectional flow path. That's what's going to happen. And you can see it affect, now look at the numbers. You can see the effect that has. So when I got upstairs, when I said it's hot and I can't see, at the floor it was 170. I bet it was hot, right? You're cooking up there. When I bust that window, I take it to 290. I create a 15-mile-an-hour wind when I do that. That's the flow path blowing through the house. Here's the sad part. Not only am I cooking my tail, now I'm in a jam, because where's the fire going to go? If it ain't, it's going to be here in a second, right? It's coming. Look over in the closed bedroom. It was 120 degrees when I got up there and started my search. And I went and went to the first open bedroom and popped the window. It was 120 degrees. I just made it 160. How did I help you? I just took 120. Can you survive 120? You're probably on the floor, but you know, you're like, hurry up, but you're alive. And when I take you to 160, nah. So that's one of the things that kind of freaked me out. I was like, man, you mean to tell me I can't, how am I supposed to do what I do? How am I supposed to rescue these people if I can kill them just by opening the daggone door? How can I do that? And that sent us down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what we could do. We also learned that compartmentation has a lot to do with it. There's no water here. This is just doors. Just open, close the door. Open the door, close the door. Open the door, close the door. So, open bedroom. It's 400 when the fire department gets there. If I close the door, I take it to 250. I didn't have to do anything yet. I just shut a door. And every time I do it, it gets a little worse, right? Every time you do that, it kind of leapfrogs. But closing the door makes a lot of difference. Just for a little bit. You probably heard that term, ventilation must be coordinated with fire attack. I used to say it all the time. I was an academy instructor, and I would be teaching ventilation. I would say that every time, hundreds of times. Ventilation must be coordinated with fire attack. What the heck does that mean? I never once had a student challenge me to go, what do you mean, boss? Never. They just went, okay, right? And I didn't know what I was talking about, really, at the time. Now I get it. Ventilation being coordinated with fire attack means I'm going to open that box at some point because I have to act on it. That's what I'm supposed to do. But I'm going to do it on my terms. If it's already open and it's a flow path in that building, can I limit that flow path just for a minute? Can I shut something just to hold it up for a second? I'd much rather make it 250 degrees and let it be 400 degrees upstairs. Just to slow it down for a second. Let me get my act together, get some water ready, get some lines pulled, get them charged, get ready to go. If it hasn't vented, it's in a vent-limited state, awesome. It's on my terms now. I'm going to open it when I'm ready. So I'm going to get my lines ready, get everything charged up, ready to go. Everybody gives me one of these, and then we'll make some openings. And the water is right on top of it. Ventilation coordinated with fire attack. That's what we mean. And it was just kind of a little gray, you know, since the 80s, for other reasons probably too. But it was a little foggy, you know, that we understood exactly what that means. There's another thing that we should understand about this, and it's the air gases inside of the structure. I didn't understand this at all. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So what you're looking at here are the oxygen sensors, really, that's what I'm focused on for the open and closed bedroom doors in one of the fires. Any fire doesn't matter. This is one of them. So if you see the pink circle, the pink line, purple line, whatever it is, with the circle on it, that is the closed bedroom door. And if you look at the blue square, that's the open bedroom door. So we start out upstairs with about 22% oxygen content, just like this room. Everybody's fine. And as the fire progresses, you'll see that the open bedroom door starts chugging downward. And when it gets down to where it is at a vent-limited state, what is it, like a little bit less than 8% oxygen? How do you survive in 8% oxygen? You don't. If you've taken your confined space training, you know that's a bad, bad deal. When you get into that kind of level of oxygen content, you're dead. One woof, I mean, one breath and you're out, man, it's over. So that's a fatal situation in that open bedroom. You're dead. Contrast that over to the closed bedroom door. Same fire, and we start out up here, we're at 22%, and when we dip at our lowest point, we're at the lowest point, maybe 18% oxygen. How do you survive in 18% oxygen? Good to go, man. When you throw in the temperatures related to doors and compartmentation, looking at 300-400 degrees in the open bedroom door, you're looking at about 100 degrees in the closed bedroom door. So 100 degrees with about an 18% oxygen content. You okay? Yep. 350 degrees with 8% oxygen content. How you doing? Dead. This is why when we talk about civilian fatalities are likely going to go up, this is exactly why. It's because not only are they against the time clock, they're going to be vent limited in 5 minutes or less. Down here, down at 8% oxygen in less than 5 minutes is when they're going to achieve that. The fire is downstairs. This isn't even on the same floor. To survive a modern fire these days, you got to be behind a door. You got to have smoke alarms, and you'd be smart if you had a sprinkler head sitting in the ceiling. That's what it's going to take for you to survive in a modern fuel fire. If you don't have those things in place, I don't know how you survive it. I've noticed, just anecdotally, I haven't pulled research yet, but I've seen multiple fire fatalities happening at once now. Used to be you get a fatality here and there. Now we're starting to see 3, 4, 5, 6, taking the whole family out, and largely for this reason. Now, how would this impact you as a firefighter? I used to always tease our guys at the academy. We used to have those MSA SCBAs that had the waste-mounted regulator right here, and we had the hose, and you would have to screw the hose on before you went in. And I could be out at our academy, and I would see a bunch of people standing around with one glove on. I'd go bust on them and walk up to them and go, hee, Michael Jackson or somebody, why don't you got your glove on? Because they won't wear their glove because they know they got to do this, right? So, can you do that anymore? That was always my backup plan. I used to love that hose because I could unscrew it. I could stick that bad boy in my coat someplace, and you wonder how I'd be in there an hour and a half. You know, we used to could do that. Can't do it anymore. You take that regulator out these days, you might as well be in outer space. You're not going to be able to suck carpet and do the old things we used to do. That they brought this to us in a PA committee. They wanted to know, they had a case where a firefighter had vomited in the mask and ended up dying in the process. And they wanted to know from the training committee what they should do. What did the training committee say? How should they change their training related to vomiting in the mask? Now, I'm kind of old guy. My first knee-jerk reaction was, you got to vomit in the mask. You go, and get on, son. Get back in there, you know. Walk it off. That was kind of my first thought. Then they go, no. But it wasn't that he vomited in the mask. It wasn't that it was a vomit issue. It was that he dislodged his face piece in sub 8% oxygen. That's the problem. He couldn't recover from that. The vomiting thing was just the cause. That just, caused him to want to pull that mask back. And then once, you know how fast that could be, right? If you've ever been there, it's a pretty quick process. You get that mask back on, but not in the sub 8 oxygen content. It's not going to happen. So think about how that impacts your survival training. Compartmentation, shutting doors is a big deal. For firefighter training as well. There have been more than enough cases of firefighters leaving upstairs windows, multi-story windows without a net or a rope. Just got to go, right? Just bailing out and not surviving the impact of the fall. You ever thought about closing a door? If you got a ditch, as we say at home, if you're going to ditch, you got to get out of here right now. Secondary egress of some sort, not the way you came in. Use compartmentation to your advantage. But when you ask guys who have been in that situation, did you think to close the door? Hell no. You're busy, you're getting up out of there, right? So does it cross your mind under stress to close the door? No, it's just like firearms training. You're going to do what you're trained to do under stress. It's not going to be something that you're consciously thinking at the moment. It's going to be whatever your training is. We got to put that in the training. Using compartmentation to help us in survival situations. We got to find some place in the ditch, get a door shut, and we look for a secondary exit. But that's not built into the training. So another reason why I would worry about our fatality rates going up. But at the end of the day, we want to at least manage or monitor doors and windows, however you choose to do that. Compartmentation from the front door, throughout the building, and then inside the building as you go is a huge piece of that. I'll show you a quick video. Watch how it works. This is in an urban setting where they have a courtyard. And when they go take a quick look here, you look in the back, you can barely see a glow in the back of that particular apartment. Now, there's no parking lot there. These guys have to lay a leader line out. So, if you're not used to leader lines, it can take a minute, as it does here. So these guys are just taking a look. They got their thermal imager, take a look real quick, and we're just going to wait for the engine to get water. How is that look working out for them? What kind of flow do they have right now? Bidirectional and unidirectional? It's bidirectional for a minute, right? What they got now? We very quickly went to a unidirectional flow. We've got a jet engine basically blowing out this place. What tactic could you employ to make that go a little differently for you? Shut the front door, right? This is pretty simple. Just shut the door. But that's not, if you've not had that training, you might not understand that particular tactic. Now let's talk about the last piece, tactics. How does this impact search and rescue? I'm used to coming in the front door doing my primary search. That's what I'm wired to do. Now I've got all this. You're telling me I can't open the door. You're telling me I can't break windows. How am I supposed to get to anybody? It makes for a little bit of an issue. Now, one of the things we want to point out, timing really does dictate the actions. It depends on when you get there and what you've got. And we say that because water makes fire better. Don't forget that lesson. So when you arrive, particularly if you respond with limited staffing, and I don't care if you dispatched 40 people to the fire. I'm talking about who's there right now, not who's on the way. So when you get there right now, this moment, and you've got 3 people, and you've got a fire and you've got a rescue. What's your best move? It's a chicken or the egg. I mean, you got to make the call right there. That's one of those things you have to decide at that moment. Do you go for the grab or do you take the threat away? Which one? It's unfortunate you have to make that choice. That's not fair that they put us in that position and we got to make a decision like that because we don't have enough stuff. But it's reality. So don't forget that that's an option for you. The rescue, do I need to grab them out of that spot right now? Do I have the people and the resources to do it? Or can I just remove the threat and make that work? It just depends. It depends on what you've got and where you are. Either one might be the way to do it at that moment. And what this has kind of evolved into is the Vent, Enter, Isolate, Search, another acronym. So Vent, Enter, Search has been around for a lot of years. We've been using it forever. And, we would just pop in a window and go see. That was kind of the thought process. And now we realize when I pop that window, what am I doing? I'm changing the flow path, right? So is there something I can do to shut that down? Can I still search that room and close the flow path off, so I don't make things worse for me and the occupant? Hopefully, if there's a bedroom door and you can get to it and close it, that would be optimal, right? So that's what we do. We've added, you go into the room, go right to the door. And we noticed in the training process, if you put a victim between the window and the door, it's just like yelling squirrel to firefighters. Once they hit that victim, they're gone. Forget the door. They're on the radio and they're pulling, right? So we had to condition a bit that I know they're right here, just shut the door. If you want them to survive and you want to get out of here in one piece, close the door. Make sure that door happens. So you build that muscle memory to get it done. Here's a little video kind of demonstrating that. They're going to pop the first window is the closed bedroom door. So it's cut off from the flow path. You'll see they open the window up here and look at the conditions. Can you search that room? Yeah, it's easy. Piece of cake. Miss Smith might just step out into the bucket. I mean, it's nothing. Very easy, very manageable. Remarkable that that little hollow core door makes that much difference, isn't it? But it has a remarkable impact on shutting that room down. They're going to reposition the ladder and take the window to the open bedroom door. This is open to the fire downstairs. Fire's not upstairs, it's downstairs. It's just venting out this window when they open it up. There we go. Different? What kind of flow is that coming out that window? It's all exhaust, man. That's a unidirectional flow path coming right at you. Where's the fire going to be in just a second? Coming right behind it. So can you get off that ladder into that window and shut that door? I keep doing this a lot, right? You better be fast. You better be quick. You better get it right on the first guess as to which side of the room the door is on. You should be able to figure that out. So keep that in mind. That's one of the big key differences we're talking about. And in this case, you'll see that this is what happens when you do go in and shut the door. So they start out at 450 degrees, 170 on the floor of the open bedroom. They pop the window, dart across the room, and shut the bedroom door. And you'll see what the impact is. It goes from 450 to 150 just by shutting down that flow path. 150 is good. That's in the top of the ish. We can work with that. We go from 170 at the floor, which was bad news, down to 120. Also awesome. We went from 12 mile an hour wind to 0. Had a remarkable effect. Over next door in the closed bedroom, still 100 degrees. Everything is good. So vent, enter, isolate, search becomes, as a truck person, becomes one of my kind of go-to things. It used to be a rare occurrence. Now it's like up at the top of the toolbox. Something we might use more often than we had in the past, with some adjustments, to make sure door control is part of our muscle memory, that we do that every time. Here's a little video I'll show you. This is an older video, but it's awesome because you'll see this happening. It's a vent, enter, isolate, search caught on camera. Guy goes in, shuts the door. It's a little crappy door, not much to it, but he gets in there and shuts it. And watch its effect on the conditions. And like turn out a light switch. Pretty handy little tactic. It gives him the ability to search that room. He doesn't have all day. The fire's still it will burn through that closure at some point. But you'll see the conditions start to deteriorate. It's not, when we say close the door, we're not saying you have, go in there and hang out and, maybe have a grilled cheese sandwich or something. We're saying you got to get in and get the search, get out. Right, move very quickly. So conditions are starting to fail. Got him just enough time. So they were able to get in and make the rescue. Things turned out really well. That kid's a teenager now. So all things worked out. That's just happened to be a great example of what we're talking about that we were able to find. So water makes fire better. Air makes fire worse. You can write that on your hand too. And compartmentation is a help anytime you can get it. Anytime you can throw barriers in that burning box, the better you'll be. So those are the things that we knew that we wanted to implement when we started to think about slicers. We didn't know what slicers was. It didn't exist yet. We just knew these things, right? So we knew that we know about water, we know about air, we know about compartmentation. We understand the rescue thing is going to be a little bit of a trick. How can we adjust our tactics? The ops chief, Robbie Phipps, our operations chief, he and I, we discussed it. We got the fire chief's approval to work on it. And we started going, we would go to fires without trying to get in the middle of it. So we were going to observe. And we got lucky. We caught a few pretty quick. And we got early on them quick. You know, we were there as the engine companies were pulling up. And we noticed a couple things. Our guys were incredibly fast at getting in that front door. If I wanted to tell them to do something different, it'd be like, pew, they gone. They were fast. And we noticed that, at least me personally, I had a hard time trying to imagine what else we could do. How do I change? I've been fighting fire the same way for, 30 years at that point. So how the heck am I supposed to change the way I think? It was mentally exhausting. And I went back to the office one day, and I was at the whiteboard. We were sitting there trying to figure this out, and I was fussing about it. One of our instructors, a guy named Jason Burrows, was in the room. And I'm like, frickin', I can't stop thinking about Recio. Because Recio is it's like tattooed on the back of my eyelids. It's what I took in every firefighting class I ever took in my life. I took layman's Recio. I mean, that's just what I know. And I said something to the effect of, I can't stop thinking of Recio. And Jason says something like, well, maybe you need a new Recio. You hear the light bulb, right? Ding, maybe we do. We couldn't figure out how to box this thing up. Couldn't get our head around it. So we said, well, what if we kind of like take all the game pieces off the board? What if we start over again? Just clear the table. And we put the pieces on the board like they make sense today, with no rules. It doesn't matter who you make mad, doesn't matter who's going to be upset, just forget all the rules. And what if we went at it with a fresh look based on what we know about science now? What would we do? And I always thought it was funny. Paul Combs drew this cartoon, but that's pretty much it. That's kind of how it happened. Was we went to the whiteboard and said, okay, we know we're going to size up first, right? So S. And we started trying to put things in some sort of priority order using the fire dynamic research to guide us through the initial engine company operations. So that's how we came to that. I'm going to talk about the guys in the red tomorrow, if you want to come hear about them. But today we're going to talk about the other guy. So that's where that kind of came from. And it was born out of Recio. If you're not familiar with Recio, these were developed in the 60s. These are the basic tactical priorities for firefighting. The first 5 things are intended to be sequential. You do those things in order, and then you could do vent and salvage anytime you want. They're called actions of opportunity. So it might be the first thing, it might be the last thing. It could occur at any point. But those top 5 things work that way. And we created Recio, or slicers, as a tribute to Recio. Did the same model. So you do the slice part in order, and you do the rest, the RS and salvage. You do those, might be the first thing, might be the last thing. It depends on what you have when you get there. So I'll walk you through each one real quick, and we'll talk about what they mean. So size up. We used to call it what's going on. We gave it a name, size up. You make your 360-degree lap. It's pretty much the same. There are some things that we've added. We focus more on thermal imaging. The thermal imagers we had back when we were doing this were those big ones, big honking, monster thermal imagers. It must have had gerbils in it or something that had to spin on a wheel because you had, it takes like a minute and a half to boot up. So we told them, fire that thing up before you get there. Because when you step off the rig, it's going to be useful to you before you go inside. So we added that to our size up part, was the, fire it on up. Now we've got these new ones. We got these little ones about the size of this microphone that they, it just hangs there. It's much more user-friendly for them. And then also realize that you might not see something when you get there. That's why that thermal imager will be so handy. So this fire, they're going to light a fire on the first floor on the couch. You can see by the instrumentation where they expect it to go, right? Probably looking for it to come out that upstairs window. So as the fire gets going, and while it develops, watch the clock and think about, I'm going to get you to give me an on-scene report. I want you to, if you were going to give the radio report for this fire when you get on scene, imagine what you might say when I tell you, okay? So the fire is going to develop. The front door is also exciting to watch. It does a lot of interesting things as far as pressurization. Don't worry about the guy in the upper right-hand window. He's in another apartment. Johnny Bag of Donuts over there. So watch the door. See the door start indicating it might be a fire, and there's some pressure building behind that door. Oh yeah, good stuff. So clearly neighbors would have called 911, we would expect. You're on your way as a fire department, and you're about to arrive on scene. So in just a second, I'm going to tell you when. Mark on scene right now. What do you got? Surprise. So you could have a structure fire, mark on scene with nothing showing. There was an article I saw somewhere that said nothing showing means nothing anymore. And that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. That thermal imager just got real handy. Because you could look, that's why we have them fired up, is you could take that thing real quick when you get off the truck and just give it a quick scan. Is anything hot? Is this hotter than that kind of stuff? I'm not talking about, pointing the little crosshairs or whatever. Who cares about that? Is this building hot or not? And if it is, I might want to be more suspicious of it. It's much more handy than it used to be. Don't forget the neutral plane. What's it telling you? I was surprised how accepting we are of an open front door. We just look right at it, pay no attention. Walk right past it. And it's screaming at you, telling you all kinds of stuff. So now we've learned to check up. Let's pay attention. What's that thing doing? Is it venting? Is it a part of a flow path? Do we want to close it for a minute until we're ready to put some water on it? Neutral plane will tell you a lot. The next step is locating the fire. Where is the fire? It's very simple. Is there a fire in this building? And if so, where? It might be very apparent. It might not be. That's why you have the TIC. Use that thermal imager to your advantage. And while we're doing this step, we're figuring out where is going to be the best place to cool it. From where, and to where will the initial water go? That's what we're after in this particular phase. And this is a little video that was a gift, kind of by accident. They taped a thermal imager to a video camera for the company officer to make his initial lap in one of the Spartanburg burns. This is a basement fire. It's not really about the basement fire. What I want you to notice is what you can see with your thermal imager that you can't see with your regular eye. Right? So if they go around back, you're going to see, yep, it's a basement fire, and that's all good. When they come back around to the side A, when they come to the front, look at the differences. Check this out. All you see with your human eye is just a bunch of black smoke rolling out that thing. If you take a quick look in your TIC, you'll see that there's a whole lot more to be able to know there, isn't it? Pretty handy deal. So if you're not getting any presentation of smoke or heat from the exterior, quick look with your thermal imager, okay, and as you make your lap, bring that camera with you and check out the rest of that house. You're trying to figure out where you want to cool it from. Identify and manage the flow path. While you're making your lap, you're looking for where the fire is there a way to control the flow path, if one exists? If one doesn't exist, that's awesome. We will make one in a minute. But right now, there isn't one. So, as you go around, you're looking for that. You're looking for, anything you can close. They now make flow path control devices. They're like curtains you can hang to try to shut down the flow path if you need to. We have a couple. We kind of like them. They're German. Then our next thing is we want to cool it from a safe location. And here we go. I didn't say outside, y'all. I said from a safe location. Now, in most residential structures, what part of the house can you not hit from an exterior position? You get most of it, right? You might not get a hallway or a bathroom or something, but you're going to get most of the house from an exterior shot. You can. So you probably will. But that's not always the case. The first fire we ran after we switched over to slicers was an attic fire on a hip roof. Now, if you think about your construction, right, really no way to get to that one good from an outside position. You have to go get under it or go through it, right? So still the same thing, cool from a safe location. What do you do if you can't get an exterior shot at it? What do you do? What you've always done. You have to go inside. Here's a great example. You know these big homes now, the big mansions, some of them have theater rooms in them. They build like a little movie theater right up in the house, man. And they put the theater seats in there and the curtains and the whole thing. All the fuel load you would ever want in that inside room with no openings except a door. How are you going to get in there if it's on fire? You got to advance. You just got to. You advance in the rain is what I had a guy in class once say that. That was a great way to say it. Advance in the rain. Throw water down range if you have to. You know, man, put a little water on it. It'll be all right. You know, so those are your options. If you can cool it from an exterior location, cool, do that. Why not do that? That was the rationale I had to go through. It wasn't that I was excited about doing it, but I couldn't argue why I wouldn't do it. If I have the shot, why not take it? And think about how we train firefighters. Any police officers in here? Admit it? There you go. A couple of them. All right, so if we were going to train, think about how we train our firefighters. Let's say the flag over here is the bad guy, right? If we were going to train a police officer to engage that bad guy right there, and let's say he's a clear threat to the people around him and to us, and there's nothing in the backstop, I got a clear shot, I go to engage him and I draw, where would I fire from? Where would I engage him from? As far away as I can, right? I'm going to engage him from here, hopefully behind cover, right? I would use all those things. You know, if it was a firefighter, how I would train you to do it with the old way of training, I would do it like this. Bang. I would run right up on top of him. Now, wouldn't that be silly? Why not? There's a thing we had in fire streams class. I remember it as a young man. We called it reach. The reach of the stream and the point of breakover. Remember that mess? The point of breakover. Holy smokes. That's old school stuff, right? Use it, man. That thing's got a big old reach on that fire stream. If you got to make a long hallway, put some water down range if it's that hot. Use the water. I didn't say from outside. A lot of times it is outside if you're in a residential setting, but not always. You know, that's what people perceive it to be, but it's not that. We found a way that another thing we had to address in this was getting inside. If we use an exterior shot, we got to get inside really fast. We wanted to be inside in like 30 seconds or less. I mean, right now kind of stuff. Get inside right now. And we were running that drill trying to figure out how to do that. And we discovered that we were pretty good going forwards, not so good going backwards. When we start backing lines up, it gets a little not good. So it only took us a couple of times of trying to reposition a line from side C to side A or whatever. And we kept stepping over the charged line our pump operator had already set down. See, it's been part of our tactical guidelines for a long time that that's what they do. They secure their water, they make sure the first line is off, and then they set the second line. They charge it and leave it by the front door. They've just been doing that for years. It only took us a few times of stepping over it to go, hey, you know what? We could just use this one. So we worked that out. That's part of the deal. If we go to make an exterior shot somewhere other than side A, they make their shot and drop the line, go get the other one. And it's, man, what a tremendous improvement. Much faster. It's a much faster deployment. So we don't want that delay to get into the interior of the building. So keep that in mind. So put it out. You got to get in and, you know, get that shot of water in there initially, then you got to go put it out. And that's in sequence. It's SLICE. But what about this cat? Rescue. You could hear the earth shake when rescue wasn't the first thing in the lineup. It moved over to the action of opportunity. Everybody went, you can't do that. Well, let me ask you this. A lot of it has to do with perspective. If you go to a reasonable neighborhood in your first due, and you go there for a fire, and you arrive on scene, and there's the homeowner at the mailbox, standing at the mailbox with the spouse and the kids, and they're holding the pet, the dog, got the dog like this, and he says, we're glad you're here. There's a fire in the kitchen. We are all out and accounted for. There's no one inside the house. Can you believe him? You know, if he seems coherent, he's the only family that lives in that structure. It's not a multifamily thing, not a duplex or anything like that, weird. I'm going to go, yeah. I'm going to go, okay, I got you. Thank you. We'll take care of business. Now, if I could be suspicious for any reason, I might go, I don't know, a little shady. You know, maybe he's not the only occupant in that in that building. Could be lots of reasons why I might not believe him too. But if he presents to be reasonable and I'm all right, well, okay. Where is rescue fall in my priority list? Am I still going to search it? You betcha. I'm going to do a primary and a secondary search. Now, if I arrive on scene and there is a rescue, I pull up and I got people hanging or jumping. I got somebody going, my baby's in that room, you know, the classic, yep, we got a rescue. Now what are you going to do? Where's rescue fall on your priority list? Bam, right to the top. First thing we got to do is deal with that. So it depends, right? Depends on what you've got and what you're going to do. We've found out a way to finally organize this in my brain so that I can understand it. Vent, enter, isolate, search is going to be my primary rescue technique if I'm ahead of the water. So if for whatever reason I'm initiating a rescue before the initial cooling has occurred, whether it be interior, exterior water shot, doesn't matter where it comes from, but if nobody's flowed water yet, then I'm going to lean towards a vent, enter, isolate, search. I'm going to be looking for a way to do it that way because I understand what opening the front door does, right? I mean, I saw the data. I can understand by opening the front door, if they were alive, I just probably killed them. So I will try to punch in wherever I can guess it might be and try to make a vent, enter, isolate, search because I can isolate the flow path and hopefully keep the temperatures in check and not make it worse for them if I'm ahead of the water. If I'm behind the water, business as usual. If the initial water is already in the house, go in the front door and search the house. It's, you know, pretty simple at that point. Do your thing. So in front of the water, consider, I'm not saying always, but consider it. How can you get a rescue effected without making things worse? Depends on what the situation is. It could be you've got one occupant, it could be you've got many. If it's one occupant, that might be different than having 2 or 3 people you're looking for as to how the flow path will impact their survivability. You have to think. Shane's one of my best buddies from down here, you know, thinking firefighters, that's the logo. That's what we're talking about. It's not one size fits all for everything. You've got to be able to look at what you've got and make educated decisions based on the research. It's not doing the same thing every time. So you might use a vent, enter, isolate, search. You might not. It just depends on what you've got and what the flow path is going to do. So keep that in mind. You know, you might cool it, you might not. One of the things that, imagine you've got 3 people. Again, the initial engine arrives with 3 people. What will you do? How do you do that? Do you put the water, you want to go water or you want to go rescue? You could switch. You could switch tactics. That's one of the things that works out pretty well. If the company officer and the firefighter go make the rescue, what was the pump operator going to do anyway? He's going to pull a line anyway, right? Let him pull the primary line then. You go pull a line, and go try to cool it if you can. If you can get a shot on it, get a shot on it. And the other 2 people go make the rescue. So you just kind of, whatever you want to call that. So you can just call an audible in the cab. Like, all right, this is what we got, this is what we're going to do. Imagine trying to explain it to somebody at the time they're supposed to do it. You know, you're up there drawing stick figures and stuff. You won't have time for that. But if you train on that in advance, you know that option, you know that command, you know what to do, and it just, boom, off you go. You already have that worked out. So rescue is an action of opportunity, as is salvage. You could do the salvage anytime. I call it a lost art because you used to never see sheetrock on top of somebody's stuff. You saw it on top of a salvage cover. And somehow we just, I don't know, whatever happened to that. So to me, it's kind of like a lost art. I like to see those salvage covers up there. So there's your initial attack sequence. It is for the first new engine company. Slicers happens, people act like it's a all-day event or something. It actually takes about 3 minutes. It's the very initial priorities for the first new arriving engine. It's over pretty quick. As goes the first line, goes the fire. And that's something we knew that we were dealing with. So this helps guide that first line so that we could break the old muscle memory and get that new one in there so that we are thinking, applying the tactics. We might go through the front door and make an interior fire attack. We might, if that's what the situation calls for. But it might call for a shot through the window too. It just depends. And that's one of the things I do with our guys. We have radio benchmarks we use. Like when they arrive, they announce they have a working fire and what a mode they're going to be in, rescue, attack, or whatever. The next thing I expect to hear on the radio is we've reset the fire from side A, B, C, D. I'm going to hear that however they've chosen to do it, they've got a quick water on it. The initial water is on the fire. The next thing I want to hear is we have water on the fire, which means it's out. They're at the seat of the fire now. Those are the three things I'm listening for on any given fire. I might not always hear a reset. It might not call for one. Now, is that cool with us? Yeah, it's cool with us. You're going to have to, I want to know why. You have to be able to intelligently explain to me, based on fire dynamics, why that was the best move. And if you can get that right, I'm okay with that. That's cool. Good job. But if you did it because, if you can't give me, I did it because of this flow path or this, we're going to have a problem. I want you to use that initial water to make things better, if you can. Don't take that risk. What I've discovered from the initial water is it kind of reset. When we say reset the fire, it actually makes it feel like 1985 to me. There's still plenty of fire in there. That's one of the, our guys are like, oh, we're going to be an outside fire department now. We're going to be, it's just the outside fire department. No, there's still plenty of fire to fight. You still got all that mess we used to do back in the day. You got surface fuels, you got, void spaces, knee walls, all these things you got to fight. It's all still there. All you did was take away the initial threat of flashover, that initial woof. You just managed that. You took the stuff that was different in the fuels and took care of it so that you can get in and do business without having to have that extra risk. That's what it does. Now, what about Recio? I joked, I'd written an article that I compared Recio to an old girlfriend at one point. We had to break up. We'd been seeing each other too long, and we had to have some time apart so we could see other people. And I had to focus on slicers for a minute, and I just couldn't see Recio. But as time passed, we got to be friends again, right? You know how that works, right? So our command officers brought that up. They said, hey, Recio still kind of works for us, where we sit. For the first two engines, slicers is the thing. But what we do in the command buggy, we think Recio is still pretty good. It works for what we're doing. So if you watch those things in comparison, as a battalion chief for us, as our command officer, it makes perfect sense, right? That's one of the first things you want to know that they've done. Have they managed the rescue? Yep. Hope so. Do you have enough resources to get your rapid intervention capabilities in place? Do you have whatever you're going to need? Are you going to, for exposures, are you going to confine it to this particular building, or are we going to burn down the block, or what's going to happen? How's this going to go? And you're going to see more blocks burning these days, not our fault. If you build lightweight construction 10 feet apart, up a hill, it's going to probably burn up, right? I mean, that's just how it is. So you're going to have to be able to deal with those things. Confining the fire. Is the initial company operations working? Are they getting the water on the fire like they're supposed to? Are they getting it knocked down? Or is it going our way, as we like to say? And then is it out? And I love this thing, visual cues, they should confirm progress. The things that scare me the most is when I hear radio traffic that says, we got water on the fire. And you look at the fire and you got black pressurized smoke blowing out of somewhere. And I'm like, no, you don't. That's a bad deal. If they believe they got it and they don't, something could go wrong there any moment. So making sure the visual cues are accurate is a good thing. I had to make myself stop saying 5 more minutes, chief. I probably said that at some point. Y'all need to evacuate the structure. 5 more minutes, chief, 5 more minutes. We almost got it. That's something we just can't do that anymore. Conditions are changing. That we just can't afford that. Overhaul. You can always tell when a good truck company was there. It has a certain look to it. Things are neat and polished off and squared away as the fire goes. Atmospheric monitoring is something that's new. Now we're wearing our SCBA until we clear it with the gas monitors because, understanding what the cancer risks are now, and I'd like to not have that. So one of our departments near us, Chesterfield Fire, is south side of Richmond. They're doing a thing, I believe they call it forced air decon. They discovered that when you come out of fires, that firefighters were off-gassing for a few minutes after they come out. If you check around like the top of the helmet, up here and the neckline and places where gases could sit, they tested those and discovered we were off-gassing for a few minutes. So you come out and you take off your SCBA and your first whiff is like nasty. So they take their positive pressure fan, fire it up in the front yard, and require their people to stand in the fan, stand in the air blowing by for a second, just 30 seconds, just stand there and let the air blow by. And then when they run those same tests, they found they cleared the gas. So forced air decon's an awesome name for that. We found a use for the daggone fan. How about that? You know, so it's so simple and so easy to do. You know, so that's one of the things we're looking at now with us. And ventilation is still in there. That was one of the things. The V was missing out of slicers. Some people got upset about that. It still lives over in Recio. You know, it's a command function. I don't get to break windows because I like to. I have to understand that when I pop that window, I'm going to influence the flow path in some way. That's a command decision. He might tell me to break a window in a certain place, or I can call and ask, can I do it? But just arbitrarily popping glass is not acceptable. As sad as I am to say that. But it is what it is. If we change the flow path, it's going to impact fire growth, and that needs to be monitored. And then salvage is kind of the same. So that's where we ended up with that. We've been running slicers now for, I don't know, a couple years, and it's been highly effective. I'll talk tomorrow about the implementation of that. Okay, so if that's what you're going to do, how do you begin? You know, what's the training process going to be like? And what can you expect for culture and pushback? You know, resistance to change. All that stuff that you got to go through is quite an experiment in that. But I want to leave you today with just a couple of some myths, some things I have heard that you know, they're just not true. You know, out there in social media, because they make some good points. They do make some good points. And one of them is this. I hear it all the time. Hit it hard from the yard. That's not us. I don't know where that came from, but that's not us. I don't know. It's just kind of out there. I don't like it because it implies that we're always going to do one thing. I want you to show up and think. I want you to evaluate, should I hit it from the yard or should I go inside and hit it? That's a decision you make when you get there, based on what you've got and your resources and fire growth. So, that one that's not us. I don't know where it came from, but whatever. So that's not something that we generally focus on. We've heard some criticism that we abandon the victims. Who's going to take care of the people? We are. We are. We just did the other day. We had a rescue. We had a fire in I would say a remote area. It took us a long time to get there. Delayed response, way out there. And the first new engine got on scene with 3 people and a chief. And that's it. Everybody else is coming, but they ain't there yet. So they've got a fire in the kitchen and they've got a lady trapped. So they ran the deal. We had an extra person. Having the chief was actually pretty cool. Now we got 4 people instead of 3. So what they did was the engine company went to make the rescue. They went with a modified VEIS. The best way to get to that lady was through a door. They went in the kitchen door because that's where the last report of her was. That's where she was. So they went in there to try to do what they could do. They encountered some pretty serious heat, you know, not looking good. And the chief, this is always, you have to brace yourself when I say this, he applied water while they were in there. Whew. How about that, right? So the 2 guys go in that back door to make the rescue to where she was, and the fire had already burned out some of this lightweight construction, real light construction. It already burned away some of the wall, and he put a hose stream in there. And, you know, he said when he did it, he goes, we have an old volunteer chief we all know, a guy named Sonny. He goes, I could hear Sonny yelling at my tail the whole time. He's dead now, but you know, it was like I had to make myself reach out and grab the bail and pull it backwards because it was the opposite of everything he'd ever been trained to do. But he knew the science, knew what it would do, but it just felt funny. And I totally agree with him. It's like when you first have to do that, it's like, oh my God, it's like trying to write with your other hand. You know what I mean? It just feels weird. So we asked the engine company that was in there making the rescue. They got in, they found her, they got her out. She was in cardiac arrest. They transported her to the hospital, and she died later that night. So they got in, and they said they were making their way across the kitchen. It was cooking them pretty hard. They were just going to try to grope around and see what they could find and get out of there. And then they felt a shot of steam. They said it was like a quick, you know, just a bam. They were like, what in the hell? You know, they got a little water shot, and then they said it got remarkably cooler. They said as the initial thing, and that's something I didn't understand. I had a steam engineer in class one time tell me this. He goes, everybody thinks steam occurs and hangs out. He's like, no, steam is a momentary event. It's only there for a flash. and then it's gone. And that's what these guys described. They said, well, you know, what's that? And then it got remarkably cooler. And admittedly, these guys were probably not our biggest fans when it came to this tactic stuff. They're pretty traditional guys. But when they came out, you know what their criticism was? I wish you'd have flowed more water. That was their feedback. They said, yeah, we felt a little burst of steam real quick, but then it got cool as all get out. And then we wish you'd just keep doing it. While they were trying to drag this lady out this house. Totally counterintuitive to what we've grown up thinking we knew, right? Think about how that impacts your Mayday stuff. When a firefighter's trapped, we direct water, we tend to direct it away from them a little bit, like we're going to hurt them, we're going to steam them. Now I will tell you to wash me out the back door. If I call Mayday, send me out the back door in a water slide. Drown me. You know, I'd rather drown than burn up. I look better, right? So, you know, water, man, use that water. It's there for you. And it works. If rescue is a high priority, then do that. Do what you got to do. So keep that in mind. Slicers Chiefs won't let anybody go inside. You're never going to go inside. I've been looking for this chief. I've been hunting his tail all over the country, and I ain't found him yet. I don't believe he exists. I think it's a bunch of crap. I don't believe it at all. So I think we have a mission. We signed on, took an oath. We will take risk. We will have to risk our lives, and there will be firefighter line of duty deaths because of it. Those are the tactical decisions that keep me up at night, is knowing that I might have to make a decision that will cost one of my good friends their lives. And that's reality. The last thing I want to do is make that decision on bad information. Right? I mean, I want to know as much about that decision as I possibly can. I don't want to hear about what we've always done. I'm not interested in any of that stuff. I want to know what's reality, what's the science, and what can I use to avoid having to put them into that position. So, and I think that's where most chiefs are. I might find this cat one day that doesn't let anybody ever go inside, and I would bet you if that's the case, he's probably right. He's probably got a 2-person fire department. You know, and maybe you don't want to go inside. That might be the right move, you know. So, but I think it's a distraction. I think people lean to that. Nobody's these safety people, you know, way too safe. I'm like, I just don't believe that. I think that's a distraction. I think you're trying to call our attention elsewhere because you don't want to talk about the facts. That's what I say to those folks. It deteriorates skill. So if you use this slicer stuff, you're not going to maintain your skills. I don't know where that's coming from. We're using the heck out of our skills. I feel like we're calling on your skills more than we ever have in the past. Now I'm making you think. You have to make decisions, Lieutenant, when you arrive on that first, initial arrival. You got to decide which way you're going to go, which tactics you're going to use. You better be good at all of them. You better be able to use an interior hose stream. You better be able to use an exterior one. You got to be able to use ladders. You got all that stuff. I would argue that it's, in fact, you use more of your skills this way than you would have the other way. So I don't get it. I don't see why well, whatever. This is stuff I hear. And I hear that it won't work on every fire. Okay, what fire are you not going to do something on? You're not going to size one up? Not going to figure out where the fire is? Put a little water on it, maybe put it out? I don't know. I haven't had it not work yet. We've had situations where we had to think about it, where you get a commercial fire and you go, whoops, wow, this is different, but it's still the same stuff. You're just looking at, okay, in this particular box that happens to be on fire right now, how are we going to apply water and manage air and make it do what we want it to do? It just depends, it requires you to think a lot more than it has in the past, but it's doable. So these are the ones that I've heard thus far. I will probably in the next couple of years have extra slides to go with it. But these are the winners so far. And a lot of that, there's a leadership piece of this. And it's a really big deal because I have not seen the opportunity for leadership in the fire service right now. It's greater now than it's been in the last 30 years. Because we've been kind of cruising. Working on stuff, trying to reduce line of duty deaths and all this kind of thing. But the way we change, I'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow, the way we change, we're okay if you give us a new piece of equipment And we can leverage that equipment to do better with SCBAs when they came along. And well, we didn't like that either. But they give us SCBAs. We got thermal imagers. These things are fairly easy, relatively speaking, to adopt because it's just a tool. It doesn't necessarily require us to change our behavior. When you start asking us to change our behavior, well, that's a whole other story. Now we got to act different. So that's more complicated. That's why I say it's an opportunity to lead like I've never seen. There are certain things that you can do right now that will save lives tonight. The easiest thing you can do is tell people when you go back home is that, look, you can put water from wherever and whenever you need to, and I won't yell at you. That's pretty simple, right? We'll talk about the tactics and the policies later, but hey, if you got to put water on something, have at it, man. I worked with the urban department once, man, a big city, and they had just had a fire where a guy had put water from an exterior position because he felt like he had to, and they were tearing him to pieces. And then I showed up. It's like, man, I'm here to tell you, bud, you did the right thing. Let me show you why, and they're working through changing now. So I used to be the guy yelling at the guy who put the water in the window. And now I'm the guy that says, I'm sorry, I had that wrong. Do what you got to do. Use the water to your fullest advantage to make it better. And I wrote this slide last night. I jotted this down sitting in the back of the room, listening to the burn survivors talk and cancer survivors and all these. And it's pretty traumatic to me. When you talk to somebody who's survived a severe burn injury or somebody who has, you talk to a widow, when you talk to a firefighter's widow, that's an experience that I don't even know how to describe to you. That when you sit down with somebody and we know the technical sides of their line of duty deaths, but we don't appreciate the human side of it, and what that's actually like. You ever thought what would actually happen if you died in the line of duty? You ever thought about it? I don't think we've given it the just attention that it needs, because it could happen to you. But think about what you would leave in the wake of that. Imagine your family. A guy like me showing up at 3 a.m. with the chaplain to to have to report that. Imagine what that would be like for your family. And then we go back, when I call it a sport, that's kind of the way we tend to think of it. I used to be that guy. I enjoyed nothing better than a hot hallway. Give me a Halligan bar and get the hell out the way. That was really that was my thing. That was my attitude. And it took me a couple of experiences. One, I almost got killed myself in a construction accident where I should have died. And I spent time in a wheelchair. And I don't know how I'm here. I click and pop a lot, but somehow I'm still walking around. I didn't expect that to happen that day. I was just at work, doing my thing. And the next thing I know, I'm trapped and graying out because I can't breathe. I didn't expect that to happen. That's one of the things I remember most about that experience was it was not on my schedule. I had plans that evening. And just like that, without any warning, things go south and there you are. I just happened to get out of it. And then talking to widows, accidentally, not like it was set up, not like it was a meeting. It was just happened to meet somebody randomly out. And we had seen a presentation on a line of duty that particular day, and that night we were out, goofing off, and ran into these girls, as it goes, and she says, y'all firefighters? We're like, yeah, we're firefighters. She goes, yeah, my husband used to be a firefighter. And I thought, I made the statement kind of jokingly, used to be. It's like the mob. Nobody ever gets out, Once a firefighter, always a firefighter. And she goes, yeah, my husband died in the line of duty. And I was like, whoa. It was her husband that I just heard about that day. And I said, wow, I just learned his case. I just went through his case study today. And she says, well, I wish at least somebody's talking about it. They won't tell me anything. She'd never been told what happened. So that's one of those experiences I'll never forget is, going through that. Hearing her perspective, that changed me from this being a sport to being a mission. It's an attitude thing. I do a lot of talking about attitude, but this has a lot to do with attitude. You can get killed doing this. I know it's fun, and I know it's fun to talk a bunch of trash on the internet. I get it. I know it sells tickets and magazines and newspapers. I understand all that. But at the end of the day, This is about getting you showing up, providing the citizen that you took an oath to do in your community, to save their lives if you have to risk yours if you have to, and don't throw it away. You know, don't throw it away. Tomorrow we're going to look at some case studies. I'll show you pictures of recent line of duty deaths and let you look at it with fresh eyes with what you know about fire dynamics, flow paths, vents, neutral planes. It's right there. Let no other brother have to die in the line of duty if they don't have to. So that's how we got to this. It was a long journey to figure it out, and again, without the help of Dan Madrikowski, Steve Kerber, we'd still be doing it the same way we always did. But those guys, when you talk about courage, to me, I don't know that there's any greater example of courage right now than to have the guts to stand up and tell us that we're doing something wrong. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? I saw a guy from Europe try to do that once at an IFC conference. He came over and tried to tell us we were doing it wrong, and we laughed his tail right back to the airport. Get out of here, man. It took us a couple years, and luckily, I guess it might have been his accent or something. But Dan and Steve were able to come along, and we've been able to hear him. So I leave you with a challenge. I'm not here to sell you slicers. You can use whatever you want to. However you can figure out how to get those lessons onto your fire ground, that's all I care about. You can dress it up however you feel like it. We chose to do it that way. That way worked for us. It still works today. You can remember it, you know, under stress, that kind of stuff. That's what we were after, something that lieutenant, see, that's the other thing I should mention. This isn't a chief thing. You know, it's the company officer thing. By the time the chiefs get there, it's over most of the time. This happens with that first new officer, that young kid sitting in the front of that fire truck, you know, that's maybe been to a few fires or something. Those are the ones that are going to have to implement that type of thing. So that's your target audience when you try to figure out how to implement this stuff. I love that post. We had this in the presentation before she passed away, but I thought it's even cooler now. So you do the best until you know better, and when you know better, do better. And now you know better. So thanks for spending the afternoon with me, guys and gals. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Thank you. You need this? Thank you, buddy. Good job.
All right, just a little housekeeping before we leave here. Tomorrow morning, class is back on the hallway, 08:30. Tonight, you're on your own for dinner. What I'll remind you is be safe. Make sure we all make it back here in the morning, all right? Other than that, Joe, y'all have a great evening.